I feel like it's kind of like an ominous entry of like, I don't know what's going to happen. I made some terrible statements to open the last sermon, and I felt like I spent the rest of the sermon apologizing. So here we go. There's a book called The Odyssey, and in this book, here's what happens. I'm not even getting to my message yet. Here's what happens in The Odyssey. They're on this mission to get home, and they settle on this island, and they send out some scouts, and the scouts don't come back, and so they decide, oh, this is a problem. We need to send out more scouts. And what the scouts find is that the original batch of scouts found this leaf, and this leaf, they get just so high that they're like, why are we going home? Why do we even care about going home? And the soldier's like, what are you talking about? That's like our mission. That's what we're doing. We're going home. And they go, well, you got to try this. And so the next batch, in essence, like you can read the book, they're like, okay, you're right. Why do we even care about home? And the mission, the big mission is in jeopardy because short term, they found something that made them so comfortable and so happy that the big mission was lost. Okay, now you can read the book and you're like, man, he did a terrible job describing it, but at least you read a book. I think what is frustrating me as a pastor, and this is the part where I have to be careful. I said freaking stupid in the last sermon, and I'm going to really try to not say that, even though I just did. The political climate has become such a distraction within the body of people who claim to follow Jesus, because I say church a lot, but really there's just a group of, you know why we do worship? You know why we have worship to open the service? It's the only time during the week that over like 5 people can agree and be in complete unison for a second. Because when we leave, we go 1,000 different directions. And so we acknowledge that by coming in and let's try to reestablish some healthy thought patterns. And here's the problem that I'm having as a pastor. I don't know how to lead people who are not desperate. Because the gospel is written as good news. And if your life is already good enough, then the good news is competing with your own good news. I'm in a difficult spot. I'm going to tell you guys, Jordan, I'm having a moment where I'm struggling in this season of life. Here's why. Because we have become so politically driven that when the people get so high on what makes them feel good in the moment, that they don't get riled up about anything except the loss of the thing that makes them feel good in the moment. I feel like that you're tracking. I feel like that you are. Gosh, I feel like I got so mean in the last sermon that I'm like, Jordan, don't you do it. And so I'm having this internal dialogue in my head, but I'm just going to risk it. I'm going to assume you guys are thick-skinned. We've got an eternal mission, this mission that is Jesus-based, this mission that says, I can do better than this. I know that I'm meant for more than this. I'm supposed to go further than this. And in 2016, it's like the whole country is round up like hey, I don't care how you lean politically. I think of myself as being sort of apolitical. So if you're afraid we're going to go real right or real left, stick with me. The church has historically leaned to the right, to its own detriment at times. And what you found in 2016 was, oh God, please don't give us Hillary. I promise, just stick with me. This is apolitical, whether it feels like this or not. I am reporting to you what I was hearing as a pastor. Don't freak out. God, please don't give us Hillary. Donald Trump gets elected, and the church does a very interesting thing. It got so high, it forgot the mission. Oh, thank God. Hey, Jesus, no. We don't need the mission. We're good. And I think it's interesting to me that what has happened in the last 18 months is it's like, whoa, wait a minute, Jesus. Where were you on that one? Biden? Kate Brown? Jesus, what are you doing? Give us our leaves back. Jesus, like, you remember that we're on mission, like life is eternal. You are eternal. Kate Brown? We don't want to think. We want someone else to think for us and tell us what to think. And you're like, that's not, we don't have the news anymore. We have an entertainment channel that tells you whatever you want to hear. Imagine a news channel, you turn it on and they're like, hey, good news. As a country, we're okay. We're going to be all right. Yeah, politically things are a little bit weird. COVID is over, so that's good. I want the real news. Give me the juice. What are our enemies doing? What's the opposition doing? It is so much easier to have a political rally than it is to have a church service where people come in and really genuinely think for themselves. We have become thought socialists. We don't want to think. We don't want to think. We want someone else to think for us. Just elect us a leader that'll think for us, and then we can go back to sleep. And we get so mad when our enemies elect a leader that we don't like because it forces us to become active again, and we don't want to be active. We want to be asleep again. I haven't even started on my notes. We might be here a while. I canceled the second set of worship a minute ago because I preached for too long. I told them not to tell you. Mark chapter 5, verse 25, it says, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, if I touch just his clothes, I will be healed. Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that the power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, who touched my clothes? You see the people crowding around you, his disciples answered, and yet you ask, who touched me? Verse 32. But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. What we see is somebody who is so desperate to get to Jesus because she had issues that she was aware of, and she didn't know what to do with it. Here's the problem. Again, I don't know how to lead people who are not desperate. I feel like I am constantly desperate. It feels like I'm constantly in this internal battle, in this internal struggle, and like who I wish that I was, I'm not. And who I am, I wish that I wasn't. Listen, if you find yourself going, I just wish Jordan was a little bit better shepherd. Me freaking too. When I meet people who have been in this church, like, I've been coming here for 2 years, nice to meet you. I'm like, what kind of pastor doesn't know people? I'm constantly like, is this okay? Are we doing it? Like, I'm constantly in this frustrating place in my head. And the problem is, when you run into people who are like, yeah, I'm good. You're like, the gospel, it's only good news to people who are experiencing bad news. This is a woman who is desperate to get to Jesus. Why? Because she'd already tried everything else. She'd been to the political rallies. I swear, I had to clarify this in the first service. I swear I'm not talking to anyone specifically because I know that we've got some real excited political participants in the church. I know that we do. I'm not saying that politics is the problem. I'm saying it's not the solution. There's a man named Ignaz Semmelweis, and I know that that's a weird name, and I know that I'm saying it right because I Googled it. He was a doctor in Hungary. In 1844, he starts his job at the Vienna General Hospital, and the Vienna General Hospital had this giant maternity ward. And the thing about the maternity ward was it was so big that they couldn't just throw the doctors and the midwives into the same maternity ward. They had to separate them. They said, okay, if you want to use a midwife, you go over here. If you want to use a doctor, a trained medical professional, like a normal person, you go over here. I'm kidding. That's not what he said. Like, doctors over here, midwives over here. Two different wings. And what he began to realize is that the maternal mortality rate, so the moms were dying at a much higher rate in the doctor's ward than they were in the midwife's ward. Now, anybody would look at that and they go, that doesn't make sense because we got trained medical professionals here and the moms are dying at the rate of almost 10%. While over here we've got the midwives and the moms are dying at a rate of only, my math is off, it's 1 per 1,000. So what's that? 1%. 0.1. There were some moms, and they were dying. It was very not cool. Jeez. I'm as concerned as you are. 36.2 per 1,000 in the maternity ward. 98.4% of every 1,000 in the doctor's ward. So he did what I wish that we would do. He stopped, he saw a problem, and he began to think about it. I know that seems simple, but we don't do that anymore. We see a problem, We're trained. We're trained by society. We're trained in culture to do this. We see a problem and we gripe at our leaders. This isn't right. Someone needs to do something. What if, just in this room right here, not even including people online, what if when we saw a problem, we thought, what can I do about it? Because once upon a time, people thought about problems instead of complaining about problems because they didn't have Facebook. This is about where I lost the first service too. He thought about it and he thought, is there something that I can do in the world to improve what I see? There's this theory going around in the world that making your bed, I heard a general talking about making your bed when you wake up in the morning is no small accomplishment, because what you're saying is, I see a problem in the world and I'm going to address it, instead of waking up, seeing that your bed's messy and going, ma'am. Because we've got a whole culture of people right now in 2021 that see a problem and go, ma'am. This is the part, I know it's offensive. You just got to stick with me because it's not something we want to stick with. If it makes you feel like, oh, this is gross, I agree. Someone needs to do something. Sometimes the solution that the world needs, drum roll please, is you to think. But we undervalue it. We don't think that our thinking is going to create any potential solutions, so we don't think. And that's where I said we're becoming freaking stupid. I said it again. I know, and I know I'm going to apologize for it again, but if we're not careful, if we never think, is that fair? Is it fair to say that if we never try to think that we become stupider? Stupider. He starts to think, and listen, here's the thing. He doesn't get it right. He goes, I don't know, the priest is walking through the halls ringing his bell as like the last rites for this 1 or 10% of moms that are dying, whatever it is. Maybe these moms are hearing that, thinking they're in trouble, and it's like the mind is this powerful thing. Maybe that's what's causing death. And so he reroutes the priest where he's not ringing the bell, and it doesn't have any effect on the dying mothers, of course. But here's where I'll give him credit. He was trying. When was the last time you saw a problem and thought about how you could participate in the solution? I'm saying this as an encouragement. You might be capable of more than you think. You might be under-challenged and underwhelmed in your life because you're looking for someone else to bring a solution to your life, because as a culture, we are becoming mental socialists. We're outsourcing our creativity. We're outsourcing our thinking. We're not trying to think. We're not trying to bring solutions into the world. We're trying to be comfortable. We just want our little leaf, and we just want to get high, and we just want to be happy. And you see this guy going, I don't know, that didn't work. So what do? Give up and complain. He goes, well, that didn't work. What else could it be? In 1847, his colleague, his name was Jacob Kolechka, was doing an autopsy, and he cut his finger. In this autopsy, in the middle of the autopsy, he cuts his finger. His finger gets infected, and through this infection, he dies. And so what this doctor decides is, hey, wait a minute, maybe it's not the bell. Maybe there's something to do with the autopsies. Maybe something's going, and here's where he got it wrong. He thought that cadaver material made people sick, which in a sense kind of was true. We now know the germ theory. We're going to get to that in a minute. There was no germ theories that caused disease. That didn't exist anywhere in the world. He just said, I think that cadaver material might be making people sick. Maybe that when unclean touches clean, that it causes the clean to become unclean. Medical practices. The Bible in 592 BC, Ezekiel describes this: a mortality rate, a spiritual mortality rate in God's people. Ezekiel 33:31, you can go look it up. But it says we're experiencing a spiritual crisis where the mortality rate amongst the followers of Jesus is too high. And it would be so easy to go, well, pastor needs to do something. Do you see how quickly we're trained to do that? How many times I was raised in the South, and famous line in the South, I'm just not being fed there. I'm just not being fed there. You know, I go to church and I just don't get the warm fuzzies, and I'm not being fed. So you know what I think I need to do? Change churches. It's a famous practice in the South, not being fed. Here's my question. If there is a spiritual mortality rate within the church, is it possible that instead of looking for another church, is it possible that we could start to ask a question amongst ourselves that goes, hey, wait a minute, why is it that the church is struggling just as much spiritually as people who are not in the church? Why is our mortality rate spiritually in the church so high? Ezekiel describes it this way. It says, they'll gather, they love the teaching. Oh, that was so good. That was so, Google it. 592 BC, Ezekiel chapter 33, verse 31. They didn't apply it. They left unaffected. They had a physical attendance and a spiritual death. Let me tell you some stats that you might think are super fun. The divorce rates, now listen, if you're divorced, stick with me. This is not a condemnation. This is saying that we should be seeing marriages flourishing because the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness. You go through the whole thing. You go through all the things that we're supposed to be producing. That's supposed to start to produce healthier unions. Like we come in unhealthy and we get healthy. Isn't that the concept of following Jesus? This lady who is desperate to touch Jesus because maybe if we can touch Jesus, things will change. And yet when you look around in the American church, what you see is the divorce rates are the same. The addiction rates, exact same inside the church, outside the church. Sex outside of marriage. Do we remember that that's a thing? That was covered? That says your best practices in a relationship is to not be in a sexual relationship outside the union of marriage because sex outside of marriage is like the audition never ends, and that's a terrible foundation for a relationship. We're not supposed to talk about that? The abuse rates, exact same. Mental health, exact same. Debt and the greed ratio that we see that's going on outside the world, the effects of sin on the lives of people not experiencing new life through Jesus, it's no different in the American church. Suicide rates are the same inside the church as they are. Is it safe? Is it safe to at least ask the question that if there's no measurable difference between those who sit under the teaching of the gospel and those who don't, if there's no measurable difference, is it safe to say that maybe we've got a mortality rate that needs addressed? The spiritual death rate that is at such a high level that at some point can we just collectively stop and go, we know this isn't working, right? If what we're absorbing from the word is having no measurable effect, it's time for a change, and I'm willing to think about what that could be. So, Dr. Semmelweis says, I got an idea. Call me crazy. I got a thought. What if, when we're done working on cadavers and doing autopsies on people who died because of sickness, what if, stick with me, what if we were to wash our hands before we delivered a baby? They're like, I don't know. I guess we could think about that. What do you suppose it would do? Here's my question. The development of a sink made a giant impact. Because they went through the ritualistic practices, didn't they, with the bell and the priest. And more religion? Would more religion help? Would more religion make people quit dying so fast? Well, that didn't work. The solution between the death of our old life and the potential for life in Jesus, the separation for that is not more religious practices. Let's just put that one to bed. We tried the bell ringing, the priest and the thing, and it didn't work. Did it? So here's the question. This is week 2. We're in the I think not series. Get it now? I think not. I thinketh not. I didn't know I could speak Old Testament, did you? We got a title for the sermon, but don't worry, we're halfway through the sermon. We're just now getting to it. Is where is our sink? Where's the sink? Where's the sink located? Where we go from death and old practices and autopsies of our marriages and autopsies of our relationships and autopsies of our jobs and our finances. Where is the sink where we begin to wash that off and try to experience new life in Christ? Where is the sink that separates death from life? Because what we're seeing is in the church, attendance isn't doing it. And you can only attend church for so long with the same old results before you get bored with it and wander off. And I don't blame people who go, I was in church for a year. I couldn't tell any difference. Because we don't know where the sink is located. It's crazy to think about now. But the hospital was casual and unaware of the gap between death and life. You guys got to think on your toes here for a second. Try to stick with me because I know that we're thinking and I know that, but if I don't get like some this, I will wander off and we will be talking about something completely different because I get distracted. So just give me like a, yeah, got it on this part right here. The hospital was casual in their practices between life and death. Oh, you guys. Oh my gosh, you're so smart. But they couldn't see it. They couldn't see the difference between life and death. Imagine that life is a battlefield. Imagine with me for a second that life is a battlefield for your soul because you are this eternal thing. And there's this battlefield. And there's this, is it flesh? Is it Jesus? Does Jesus want what's better for me or do I want what's better for me? Let me tell you what, the reason that we love freedom so much, stick with me, the reason that we're so politically driven in politics, the reason as a nation we've gotten so excited about politics is because we think that freedom means freedom to do whatever we want. That's not what freedom in Christ is. Freedom in Christ is the freedom to obey Jesus. I wonder what the political rallies would look like if like, we want to be free to obey. Where'd everybody go? We want to be free to do whatever the heck we want. You thought I was going to, I didn't. We've lost this understanding of freedom. We've lost this concept. Okay, so imagine there's this battle, and there's this battle for your soul that's going on right now, and you were casual or unaware of it. In the same way that the hospital was casual and unaware about the concept of life and death and the crossover, imagine there's a battle going on for your soul, and you're unaware. So here I want to paint you a picture. We've got Braveheart over on this side of the field, and they're like beating their swords against their shields, and they're ready to go, and you've got principalities. This is all in the Word. You got principalities that are competing for your heart and for your attention and for your mind and for your thoughts, and you are they're ready to go to battle, and like it is going to be a distraction of your mind. Don't think. If we can just get them to stop thinking, mission accomplished. What's second? Make them think that their leaders are going to do all the hard work. Let them outsource everything that makes them unique and individual in the world. Take away their confidence that they can make an impact in the world, and there's this battle on this side, and on this side, I'm a millennial, so I can say this. You've got man buns and chai lattes and Subarus and self-help and personal coaches, and they're just walking around casual and unaware that there's a battle. Can you imagine the danger of a group of people who are in danger and on a battlefield, but they are casual and they're unaware? What would you say? Hey, stupid? That's hurtful. That's a microaggression. Yeah, but there's a battle. There's a battle going on, and you're casual and you're unaware. And so as a casual and unaware person, wake up. This sink is where they went from casual and unaware to intentional. It wasn't more religious practices. It was one small little adjustment that said, hey, I think that we're not taking the sink seriously enough. Is this making sense? Is everybody with me? It was a minor adjustment, but it made all the difference. So my question is, where is our sink where we become aware that there is a battle being played out and the consequences of this battle are life and death? Life and death, and we can't be casual or unintentional. Okay, so let's go back to the woman, because I think she's such a great case study. She's a wonderful biblical case study of somebody who became aware of the desperation. She became aware of the gap between life and death. The woman who was there had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. Not casual, not unaware. She was a social pariah. And she was a social pariah because the law that had been put into place to save lives was costing her her life. Hear me. That God, when he would put rules in place, he was like, don't go playing with dead things. Why? Just don't. Parents of young children, don't play with that. Why? Now, if you're like me and not like Lacey, if you're like me and not like Lacey, and your kids go, why? Your knee jerk is, then go ahead. Stick the fork in the socket. I told you not to. Why? Try it. But God gives them a rule, says, don't play with dead things. They go, why? He goes, I can't explain it in a way that'll make sense. Well, now the same rule that was put in place to save lives is costing her her life. She is a social outcast because what they knew in the day that the law was given was that when unclean touches clean, clean becomes. When have you ever sent your kids out to play with a dirty dog and the kids come back clean and the dog comes back cleaner? Things get dirtier Way easier than they get cleaner. Okay. She suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and spent all she had. Yet, instead of getting better, she grew worse. She was at least aware of her desperation. And this is where I struggle as a pastor. This is where I beat my head against the wall on an average Tuesday. It's like, I don't know how to preach to people about good news when they go, yeah. The gospel is designed to be a life-saving measure for people who are desperate. The closest we've ever been to desperation last year during COVID, which, by the way, is over. I'm declaring it, but not important. Do you guys realize how many hateful letters I've received over the last year? Do you have any idea? Can I just vent for a second? Oh my gosh. People, you say COVID and they're like, I can't believe. I'm so glad COVID is over. It's nice to see your faces again. We're not recording this, so I can say whatever I want. I really try to lean towards teaching, but I'm going to have a preaching moment. Don't forget, I'm from the South. I've been raised around Baptists. I can do it every now and then. I think sometimes we come to church because it seems like it's kind of the right thing to do, and we claim Jesus because we don't want to go to hell, but we're not really examining our thinking. We outsource our thinking to our politicians now, and then or the pastor, or what the pastor says, or what the pastor does. We take no personal accountability, and the problem is the same law that was designed to save our lives is bringing death. Because the world that says, I don't even believe in Jesus, I can do whatever I want, at least they're free. You're not. You're statistically speaking, I'm not pointing fingers, but statistically, the church has become just as bad as outside the world. But the difference is we're under the law so that we know that we're bad, and so we're miserable, and there's shame. And we're the most miserable version of humanity. The law that was designed to bring life is now bringing death, and the church has gotten weird. Really weird. Because we're not better than anybody. We just have to pretend that we are so that we can pretend we're following the law. Do we see the mortality rate in that? All right, I'm going to try to get through this. This is why we didn't have worship in the second service. At once, Jesus realized that the power had gone out from him. The power of Jesus. Did we forget that that's what Jesus is about? Is this power to go from dead to life, the cross, the resurrection, the mercy and justice. It's a cross on purpose. It's symbolic because it's where the intersection of mercy and justice meet, and it was Jesus. Jesus is the intersection of justice and mercy, and the power of what he did grants us this new life, and Jesus has become just a word we throw around casually. This lady wasn't casual. She was on her hands and knees crawling because she believed that there was power available to her. And we hear that and we're like, yeah. Most powerful in my mind, this is one of the most powerful verses in the Bible. He said, who touched me? And they said, you see the people crowding against you? Everyone's touching you. Stop and think about what that means. That means that there were people in proximity of Jesus, but because the sink wasn't in place, because there had never been a sink that went from death to life, they could encounter the source of life and remain unaffected. Her journey to Jesus didn't start as an action. It didn't start as a choice. It started where? As a thought. I think Jesus is a solution. I think I'm going to take control of how I think. I think Jesus is a solution. And if I think that Jesus is a solution, I'm going to make choices. And those choices are going to result in actions. But it all starts in how we think. I'm trying to wrap this up. Stick with me. What time is it? I feel like someone was just timing me. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Think of this. That means there were people who physically came in contact with Jesus, and they were casual and unaware. They were casual and unaware about the fact that Jesus comes to earth. He is addressing the battlefield. He is guaranteeing a victory on this battlefield that they weren't even aware of. And they're like, Jesus. And the response was, That means it wasn't just proximity alone. Louis Pasteur in 1860 has a wild theory. 1860. He's like, hear me out. I think that there are germs that are really, really little. I'll get back to the notes in a second, but imagine this. I'm not done, not even close. I just want you to grasp. Try to put yourself in this position. I think that there are germs, and the medical community is like, okay, they're really little. How little? Can't see them. What? But, stick with me, these little bitty bug things are getting into people, making them sick, and they're dying. Little bitty, invisible things, where are they? Everywhere. If you can kind of put yourself in the scenario, you're like, you okay, buddy? Been working some long hours? No, they're little. They're everywhere. And they're getting people, and they're making them sick. And pretty soon you'll be like, okay, why don't you, maybe like a nap. But what he discovered was the germs that cause disease theory 20 years later after the effect of what the original doctor had discovered in Hungary. So here's my question. Back to my notes. Here's my question now that you understand how crazy it can sound. What if as a pastor I were to say that our sink where we wash from death into life, what if our sink is the way that we think? Seems too small, doesn't it? I want big change in my life. Okay, then it has to change with the way that you choose to think. No, we want something bigger. No, thinking, it's really small and you can't see it. But if it gets into you, it can have a really positive effect. But if, it can make you sick. And it sounds just as crazy, doesn't it? That the sink where life goes from death to life, the sink where we wash, like a baptismal. Thank you, Leslie Beard. That I hate it. I hate rhyming. I hate it. And I think the reason I hate rhyming is I saw it abused growing up. Like I said, I was raised near a lot of Baptists. And if the glove don't fit, you got to acquit. Why do you remember that? It rhymes. It sticks in your brain. I hate rhyming. Lacey's like, if you don't do that, people forget so I'm going to do it, but just know I'm working up the courage to do it because I hate it that much. I think what we're lacking, I think the reason for the high spiritual mortality rate in the church, I think the reason that the church doesn't demonstrate any different than the world outside of the church is because we don't have a think sink. Oof, it sounds bad, I know, but you'll remember it. I know you're going to remember it. A place where we go and we say, help me to reestablish the way that I think about life. I don't have a mic, but hang on, I'll talk loud. A place in our life where when life is falling apart and our marriage is stressful and our kids are acting bad and our job is weird and the politics we have to have a place where we go to God and we go, I'm thinking wrong. I'm going nuts. I got to have a place where the death of old patterns and old habits can get washed off so that I'm not dragging death from an old experience into the potential for new life. A place that we wash our thinking. And I know that seems like a small thing, unless it isn't. Let me tell you what this is not. I hope someday he listens to this. This is not Tony Robbins. All the power is in you. No, it isn't. It is not inside of you. The power to just pre-guess and predetermine. This is not a self-help positive thinking seminar. You didn't have to pay $5,000 to be in here. Because you wouldn't, because it's kind of depressing when you find out you're not going to be enough just on your own. We have to apply the thinking sink to that goes, God, shape how I think. You're going to catch yourself this week. You're going to catch yourself in moments of panic and You know what the sink has been for the church for the last 5 years? And I hate to say it, and I'm going to, and I know I'm going to make some of you mad. I'm not sorry. Life is going stressful. Oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Trump. I swear I'm not targeting any one person. And if you feel attacked, good. The headwater of life, the headwaters of creation and health and life that overcame death. Have anybody ever been to the headwaters of the Metolius? It's just like water that pours out of the side of a mountain. It's not the White House. Kingdoms have arisen and fallen, and Jesus says, I'm the same yesterday, today, and forever. Does that wash over you the way that it washes over me? Like, wait a minute, I don't think about that enough. I get caught up in my circumstances. I get caught up in this, and I get caught up in that, and I start to try to treat my craziness with all my own little concoctions. Gosh, I could preach this sermon for the rest of my life. I'm going to go to 2 Corinthians 10:5. It says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that set itself up against the knowledge of God. What does it say? You make a point to address God as God. You go to God and you go, can you just help me wash this off today? I'm going to get germs on me again tomorrow, but for today, can you just kind of help me think through this? I need a sink real quick where I can quit applying death to everything that I do. Have you ever noticed that when somebody, well, I'm not going to go there. Okay, I'm not done. And we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. I can't preach this sermon to somebody who's like, oh, this is nice. If you're sitting out there right now and you're thinking, this is good, probably not for you. This has got to be given as an alternative for a life that is in chaos and desperate and willing to crawl through a crowd on hands and knees for a solution. It's the only way that it makes sense. You call every thought captive, like you catch yourself in a moment of chaos. You go, no, I'm not going to think that way anymore. I'm not going to think about life as being bigger than God. I'm not going to think about life as a challenge that's so much greater. I'm not going to think about the chaos. I'm not going to hinge my hopes and dreams on who gets elected anymore. I'm not going to think that way anymore. I'm not going to think that my spouse is always the problem. I'm not going to think that my circumstances are always the problem. This is one of the most disenfranchised ladies in the Bible, and Jesus didn't say, well, if you do it right. He says your thinking opened doors for you that no longer left you a victim. Now listen, there are victims of circumstance, but whether or not you accept those as a victim or not is a choice. How do we get away from mental socialism? We go, wait a minute, what I think matters. How I think matters. How I choose to process life matters, because I don't have to be a victim. I can start to think of life in better terms. Are my circumstances going to change? Not always. But I don't have to take them laying down hoping that somebody out there is going to come in and make my life better. I'm going to look around and I'm going to start to address the little things in my life. I'm going to choose to think differently so that the death of old circumstances, the death of old relationships, the death of old failures, the death of old failed jobs, the death of old finances, those deaths that I've experienced can be washed off so that I can think about them accurately so that they don't continue to kill me in the future. I think of this hospital goes, well, of course, now we have the technology to go, yeah, you don't go do an autopsy and then try to bring life into the world. Wait a minute. Did you hear what I said? You don't go do an autopsy and then turn right around and go to try to bring life in the world without some sort of a separation? I think the reason that we've got such a high mortality rate amongst those who follow Jesus is we don't know where our sink is located. We don't know how to apply our thinking in a desperation that goes, Jesus, I need the power of who you are. I've got to get to you before I do anything else. And so I wouldn't say, how well do you call your thoughts captive? I won't even ask that. Because the reality is, most of us probably don't at all. I swear this could go on for another hour, and I also swear I won't do that to you. But try to hear this, and I'll wrap it up. I'll make you a deal. If you'll try to understand this point that I'm going to make right here, we'll call it good. It's a lot to try to pack in to one final thought. Here's what I'm hoping. If you never learn how to call your thoughts captive in accordance with who Jesus says that he is, if you can't learn how to think, you will always be a victim to how you feel. If you never learn how to think, you will always be a victim to how you feel. I'm going to say it one more time. What is a think sink? A think sink is where we wash off what we feel and we determine to stick to what we know to be true. And we begin to base our thinking on who Jesus is. We start to think of life on an eternal scale. You know what I doubt Jesus will say when we get to heaven? Who'd you vote for? I feel like that's a drum I could beat a little bit longer. What political party were you with? Don't worry, Jesus. I'm a Republican, just like you. Pause. Our life is already dead because all of the death and all of the destruction is going to get brought into new opportunities if we don't find out where our sink is located, where we can begin to wash our thoughts and go, God, help me to learn how to think about this. And you're going to go through stress this week. I'm praying that you do. I am praying that you go through stress. You go, how could you pray that? Because we kind of suck as people if we never experience stress. We're never desperate. We don't realize that we're desperate. We don't think of life on an eternal scale. Jesus is casual. We become one of those people that bump into him at church on Sunday, but we're never changed by it. We're never affected by it. It never gets in because we don't feel our desperation because we've never shaped how we think. Please tell me this is making sense. Please tell me that this week when you go through stress that you're willing to go, God, tell me how to think about this. Please tell me that you'll turn the news off just a little bit and start to reestablish your thinking, because if not, what you're saying is, tell me what I think today. What do I think? Hannity? I felt like it got real cold there for a second. What do I think? Facebook? What do I think? CNN? Just kidding. What if we could every day this week, if in the moments of stress, in the moments of chaos, in the moments where it feels like, life is just not making sense, what if we would dedicate ourselves to going to the sink just for a minute, going, God, tell me how to think about this. Tell me what you think about this. Give me your heart on this so that my life can stop looking so much like the life I was trying to leave when I came here in the first place. On this, I swear we're done. We're not going to do worship at the end of the service. We're going to wrap it up right here. But here's what I'm going to ask, is that this week that you start to consider, wait a minute, does my life look different yet? When I came to Jesus, didn't I expect that things would change? Didn't I expect that there was going to be a challenge? Didn't I expect that I have something to offer in the world? Didn't I think that when I go out into the world, I'm going to be able to make an impact? Am I living that, or am I living the same version of the life that I left because I never went through the sink? I was never willing to wash off bad habits and take on new disciplines and reestablish the way that I think. Let's pray. Lord, I can't overlook it. We've got to have a sink where we start to reshape the way that we think about life. It makes just as much sense to work on an autopsy and turn around and try to deliver a baby as it does to operate in old habits and think that we can expect new life. It seems so small. It seems so small that the way that we think could have such a giant impact. But God, success or failure rides on our ability and willingness to rethink. To think about life according to who you are. To think about life according to what the Word says. We have to reshape our thinking. I know that we can't do that in one sermon, but God, help us to start moving that direction. Help us in moments of stress to be people who can ask, God, how do you think about this? How do you want me to think about this? Help me to feel the desperation that I forget exists. Help me to look at life on an eternal scale. Pray in Jesus' name, amen. Here's what I'm going to ask before we're done, before we're dismissed. I think there's a shared moment here. We did it with our heads bowed and eyes closed in the first service, but I want to do it looking up. Could we be honest? Because I think, like I said, I declared COVID over. Good news. We've missed human interaction. But then we get it back. And have you noticed this? We start seeing people again and we lose the appreciation. People. I'm waiting in line. Traffic. We go right back into old habits, don't we? So here's my question. In the shared experience of attendance with people, you guys are sitting way too close to each other. But in this shared moment, right before we wrap up, and I'm telling you, we're done. But here's what I want to ask. If you would say this, I need a sink in my life. There's too much crossover between death and the potential for new life. I keep looking for new life in like jobs or people or excitement, and I feel it. I feel like death just creeps into every aspect of my life. I need a sink. I need to learn how to think about life differently. Amongst friends, and listen, before I even ask you to, I'm going to raise my own hand. If that's you and you go, I need a sink. I need the development of a sink in my life. Would you raise your hand? Now, hang on. Don't put it down yet. Don't put it down. What would happen? Honest question. What would happen if only the people with their hands raised started to practice that just for a week? You can put your hands down. What would happen? We would stop experiencing the mortality rate, if nothing else, in this room. It would change the impact that we have in our relationships and our interactions with people. Isn't that why we came to Jesus in the first place? this surrender of the old life, this surrender of old habits. What would happen if you raised your hand as a physical symbol? What would happen if in those moments you catch yourself getting ramped up in an old habit? What would happen if you went back and go, hold on, where's the sink? I'm sorry, a think sink. That's so hard. But now you'll remember it. I need a think sink. I need a place where I can apply new patterns and new habits to how I think. Jesus said, you're thinking, the way that you think, that is the pattern forward. Let me pray. Lord, put it into practice. My words are so limited in the ability to express what I'm trying to explain. But Lord, I just pray this. In the same way that death creeps into new life, God, if we don't establish how we think, if we allow negativity and isolation and all the things that go with that, God, if we don't get a control of that, things don't change, and we experience a mortality rate that's too high in our churches and in people who claim to follow you. There's no separation. Lord, give us, I pray, the desperation of the woman who will crawl through a crowd just to get a touch of the power of who you've got. Please, God, don't allow us to be people who could just casually bump into you. Help us to be intentional. Help us to understand the weight and how much it matters, the way that we choose to think. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.